All right. I think we're ready. Oh, we're gonna get started in 1 moment. Oh, all right. Well, thank you everyone for joining. We've been looking forward to having this panel for a few weeks now, so we're excited to get started. Welcome to Paths to the Bench. Today I have the pleasure of moderating this conversation with both Chief Judge Susan Blanco of the Colorado 8th Judicial District in Fort Collins, Colorado, and Justice Michael Hyman of the Illinois 1st District Appellate Court in Chicago, Illinois. Before I allow them to introduce themselves, even though I just read their titles, my name is Aubrey Coleman. I am a program manager of the Microsoft Airband Initiative. And I am also serving as the 2022 and 2023 ABA Young Lawyers Division Chief Engagement Team, where I'll be serving as the Vice Director. We're starting the panel today. We're going to ask both of the justices to state their name, their title, and their district, and also something really cool about themselves. So to make sure that I am in compliance, I will say something cool about myself. Right now, I'm not very cool, but I will say I am the father of 2 newborn twins right now that are actually staring at me on the other side of this wall right now. So.
That's great.
And a boy and a girl.
Congratulations.
Thank you. Justice Hyman, would you like to start?
Yes, I sit in Cook County and the Appellate Court. I've been a judge since 2006. I ran for election in 2008. For the Circuit Court, and then in 2013 I was appointed by the Supreme Court to the Appellate Court, and in 2020 ran, and I've been on the Appellate Court for a little over 10 years.
Fantastic. Oh, and your cool fact?
My fun fact, I'm authority on Abraham Lincoln, and whenever I speak about Lincoln, which I'm not going to do today, I do wear a bow tie, which is the only time I wear a bow tie. I'm not a bow tie, not like Justice Stevens or John Paul Stevens. So.
Is it just a bow tie? Do you wear the hat too, or is it just a bow tie?
I don't have the hat. I must say.
We'll have to work on that. We'll have to get you a hat.
But I do, in my chambers, I have a picture of myself shaking hands with Abraham Lincoln, because when I grew up in Illinois, and my family went to Springfield, and there was a model of Lincoln, and we shook hands. And a young person came into my office and looked at the photo and said, "I didn't know you were that old."
You should have told me you just had a flux capacitor. You just went back in time and then came back. Thank you for joining the panel. Chief Justice Blanco.
Yes, good morning. Thanks for having me. I am Susan Blanco. I am the Chief Judge in the 8th Judicial District of Colorado. So for anyone who likes New Belgium Fat Tire beer, we are kind of the microbrewery capital of Colorado over here, and we're up north, home of Colorado State University. I have not been on the bench for as long as the justice. I was appointed in 2017 by the governor. And about 4 years later, I became the chief judge and the first female chief judge for our jurisdiction. And so my capacity is I am still a trial court judge, even though I do all of the management of probation in the courts. I still preside in the trial courts at this time as well.
Fantastic.
Oh, fun fact, sorry. Fun fact, I am not a dancer, but I was choreographed by Michael Jackson's choreographer once. And so that is my one moment of fame. So thank you.
We were talking about this before the panel. When we started today, never did we thought we would have Abraham Lincoln and Michael Jackson choreography come into the same discussion. So we are already off to a really great start.
That's awesome.
So one thing that you both brought up that I like that you highlighted is you guys have different paths to the bench. And I don't mean that to be cheesy as is in the title, but your literal different ways of you got to your exact seats were vastly different. Can you, Chief Judge Blanco, since you're on my screen, would you mind walking me through a little bit more of how you got to the seat? And it sounds like you were appointed. How does that process work?
Absolutely. So in Colorado, you apply and there is a nominating commission that interviews you, and they select usually 3 individuals, and those names are presented to the governor. The governor is the person who appoints our judicial officers. Magistrates are hired by the judges in a particular jurisdiction, but the judicial officers are appointed by the governor. We are retained on the ballot by the voters, but we are not allowed to be political, and we are not allowed to really put any sort of anything political out there to try to gain any sort of favor and votes and things like that. So we're supposed to be pretty quiet and remain kind of out of that purview of the community.
So you mentioned retained. What does retained by the voters mean?
So after we have been performing our duties the first time, it's about a 2-year period. It's kind of like a trial period for the community too. And we're placed on the ballot. If the voters want us to continue to serve as a judicial officer, they can vote for us. If they do not want us in those positions, they'll vote against us. And if the majority does not want us there, then we are no longer serving the community as a judicial officer.
Interesting. Are there term limits on how long you can go through this process?
I can serve until I'm 72 years old.
Oh, okay. Okay. So once you're nominated, you put yourself forward and then you go through the process and the governor appoints you. As long as the voters keep voting you in, you don't have to go back to that process again until you're 72.
That's correct. And then in order to become a chief, you are appointed by the Chief Justice of the Supreme Court in the state. And so that's our process, which will be different than the justice's process in Illinois.
Perfect segue. I was like, let's get you in here, Justice Hyman. How, is your process the same? Is it different? How's it work in Illinois?
Very different. Illinois is a political state. And in Illinois, there are 2 types of judges. There is a circuit court judge, talking about the trial court, circuit court judges, and appellate court judges and Supreme Court judges. They're elected by the people with elections when there's a vacancy. And when you win, you are, depending on where you are, circuit court is 6 years, and then you run for retention. You run on your record, not political like in Colorado, but political parties get involved, and you need 60% of the vote. Very rare that a judge is not retained, but it does happen. And then if you're in an appellate court, it's 10 years, and Supreme Court is 10 years. The other way is to be an associate judge. The pay is a little less, and you don't have to run and be voted by the people. You're voted by the circuit court judges in your circuit. And they will elect you. And then every 4 years, you come up for retention. We do not have any kind of age limitation. The Supreme Court had that issue some years ago, and because some of the justices were over the age at which they would have to run or be able to run, it was found unconstitutional. The other thing is that when there is an opening, the Supreme Court will appoint openings for the circuit court.
Supreme Court of Illinois, correct?
Right, circuit court, and for the appellate court. So in my situation, the first woman Chief Justice of the Illinois Supreme Court, Mary Ann McMorrow, called me. What happened is I was a little story. I was coming back from lunch. I was president of the Chicago Bar Association, came back from lunch, and the secretary said, "Do you have a call from Justice McMorrow?" I said, "Okay." I called the phone number and a woman answered. I said, "May I please speak to Justice McMorrow?" And the woman on the phone said, "Michael, this is Justice McMorrow." I said, "Oh, I didn't think you were going to answer your phone." She said, "Well, I am, because I'm in Springfield, and actually their offices are also an apartment." And she said, "I have 2 things to tell you. One is I'm retiring." And I said, "Oh, congratulations, very nice," and everything else. She told me who's going to replace her. She said, "Well, no, I got one more thing I want to tell you." She said, I have 1 appointment left before I retire. My last appointment, and I want it to be you." And I said, "Oh that's terrific. I accept." She said, "Well, don't you want to talk to your wife about it?" I said, "Yes, but I don't want you to change your mind. So I will talk to my wife and I'll call you back but otherwise I've accepted." I don't want to, and then I ran in 2008, and in 2013, another justice on the Supreme Court appointed me to the appellate court. are assigned me to appellate court. There are in Cook County 6 assigned judges and 18 elected judges. And eventually the assigned judges get switched into the elected positions, and that happened to me, and I ran in 2020. Again, I won. And now I have a 10-year term.
You answered the question I was about to ask. So you can go from associate appointed judge to an elected judge. That sounds like
The associate judges, they would have to run for the circuit court, yes. Right now, the associate judge cannot be appointed as a justice on the appellate court. They would have to run.
Okay.
They can't be one of the assigned justices. But yeah, so there's a lot of elections. In Cook County, as many of you know, is a one-party county. So the big election is in the primary.
So I'm gonna zero in on that, and I'm gonna ask you first, Justice Hyman, but then I'm gonna come back to Judge Blanco. What I heard you both mention in your introductions is your position, your pathways to the bench, minus the elections in Illinois, of course, are intended to be nonpartisan, but partisan politics somehow sneaks its way into in certain cases. How do you keep that separate as far as when you're serving and even as you're campaigning?
Well, in Illinois, it is partisan when you run.
Well, right.
And so there's rules, various rules with regard to what you can and can't do. All states like Colorado and Illinois have judicial codes that are extremely important. And I'm on a committee with regard to the judicial code in Illinois. And we give advice to judges and lawyers who are running. But you have to meet certain requirements when you're not running. And once you're elected, you're apolitical. I don't know who is a Republican or Democrat with me. I really don't. I'm apolitical. And as a judge, that's the way it should be. If we are independent, we have to be independent of politics with a capital P. You're never independent of small p politics.
So are the rules that you're saying that you put forth kind of a way that you guys use a safeguard to kind of protect yourself against having to deal with that when you have to go back and run again for your re-elections?
Well, when we run again, it's retention. When you run for retention, and there's a different set of rules when you're running as opposed to when you're just sitting.
Got it.
There's things you can do when you're running that you can't do when you're just sitting.
Got it. Chief Judge Blanco, it sounds like in your case, you guys, from what I've heard, you guys will have to go through a similar retention process. How does that work? Where you balance? Is it very similar to how Justice Hyman mentioned in Illinois, how you balance the attendant effects of politics versus trying to remain neutral?
Yeah, we really don't get involved. We're apolitical, as he mentioned, and he put it quite nicely. And, it's a little unnerving because, most of us have left our careers to come serve in the judiciary, and the voters are the ones who get to determine whether we're being retained. We are not involved. We don't put any political signs in our yards for any candidates. We are on any issues. We're not allowed to do that. Our spouses cannot do that as well. We have to honor that even in as a complete household. We don't fundraise for anything. We are limited by the rules, but the rules are really in place, not because they want us to not be involved in the community, but they really want for us to be nonpartisan and independent for all the reasons that the justice explained.
So in theory, you could not have a household where one spouse is running for like a state representative or congressional position, and then have a justice and for the other spouse. Is not allowed, or is it more just bad practice?
Well, we're not allowed to. I would have to seek advice from our courts on how I would handle that if my spouse decided to do that. But sometimes, your spouse will be very passionate about an issue. You might be as well. But this position limits both of you because there cannot be things in the yard, and we have to be very careful about how we are perceived in the public. If I'm walking to go to lunch in downtown Fort Collins and someone wants to have me sign a petition, I don't sign any petitions. And so we are limited. And that's one of the things that, if you decide that you want to join the bench, are good things for you to kind of think about, because we are in a position that we are careful and we limit some of those freedoms for ourselves as part of our public service and the role that we serve for the community.
Yeah, I think there's an interesting dichotomy here. As you heard, once we are judges, the politics goes away, so to speak. In Illinois, not as much if you have to run again, but it goes away. Yet, in many communities, it's capital P politics in order to get you on the bench, whether it's the governor or a committee or an election or whatever the process is, politics is involved. And that's why in certain communities, the judges think like the people in elected office. And that's throughout the country. And so if you're interested in a judicial career, being involved in politics can be crucial. In Illinois, it's crucial. And I can tell you that I was not involved in politics. I spent my time doing pro bono work and working hard and civic involvement and bar activities, all sorts of stuff, and very active in the ABA. That's my commercial. Get involved in the ABA, it's the best. It was very important in my career, extremely important. But you have to have that usually. And when I ran for the first time after being appointed by a justice on the Supreme Court, I was told by one of the most powerful politicians in Cook County that I had no chance because two reasons. I wasn't vetted by the Democratic Party, by Justice McMorrow. She doesn't vet judges with the Democratic Party, of course not. But what he's saying is you weren't involved in politics. And secondly, I'm of the Jewish faith, and no one had won an election at the time I ran in 2008 in 18 years, countywide, of the Jewish faith. Any office. Cook County is very, the fallback is Irish and women. It's changed a little bit, and now it's more Latinx, and Latinx women. But the fact is that certain backgrounds don't resonate with the public.
Interesting. How did you break through that?
Well, to make a long story short, I looked at why were Jewish candidates not winning. And part of it was they weren't engaged with certain communities. And I hired an African-American about my age who had worked on campaigns of people you know, Jesse Jackson Jr., our county clerk who is Black, worked on was a chief of staff for a county commissioner who was Black, a political activist, a political organizer, and very well known in the west side, the south side of Chicago. He had never worked with someone who was white. And I was recommended that I should contact him, and I did. And he said, well, you can't hire me unless I meet you and I decide you can hire me. So we met, and I hired him. We became close friends. We still are to this day. He helped me in both my campaigns. And a horrible thing happened. One of my opponents went to the Chicago Sun-Times a week before the election. And on the front page of the Chicago Sun-Times, on Monday morning, with the election 8 days away, it said, judge hired ex-warlord. I knew, and the person I hired, when he was a teenager and a young adult, he was a gang member. And he went to prison for a gun charge. He didn't use the gun. He had the gun. He didn't use it on anyone. He never shot anybody. I ran in 2008. In 1990, he was pardoned by the governor, 1990, 18 years before.
Mhm.
So what I did is I had a press conference immediately that morning, the City Hall, County Building, and I had the most prominent people in town, African Americans, Latinx, Jewish, politicians, community leaders, all sorts of people came out to say, support me. And I said that I believe in redemption. No, every judge should believe that when people turn their lives around, if a person can, very few people don't. Most people do. And he did. His wife worked for an alderman. His daughters were leaders in the community.
Mhm.
In any event, the Chicago Defender Black newspaper, which does not run editorials on anyone, ran an editorial. Vote for me. I won. I won on the south side, the west side, and I won with over 50,000 votes.
Talk about building a consensus and taking mud and turning it into a positive. I love that story. I love this story. I want to double down onto that because you're bringing up something really interesting about our paths in life. The job that this political campaign advisor was for you definitely had a very unique path to his role, and he's led influential campaigns. Tell us a little bit more about your upbringing.
I was born in Elgin, Illinois. It's about 40 miles west of Chicago. It's a small town. And I have a happy childhood and loved it there. When I went to elementary school, the area I lived in, about 250, 300 students. I was the only Jewish student. And then 3 years later, we had a second. That was my brother when he entered kindergarten. And then in fifth grade that summer, my father was transferred to Philadelphia, and I went to school then in Philadelphia, including graduated the same high school as Kobe Bryant.
Oh, Lower Merion.
Lower Merion, you're right.
Awesome.
So that's my upbringing.
Yeah, it was it in your upbringing where you decided to enter into the law or to become a justice, or did that happen much? It sounds like it happened much later in life because
Well,
it wasn't.
It had to do with becoming a lawyer. I never expected to become a judge. I was not involved in politics. Cook County is I think 23rd largest state in the country if it was a state.
Mhm.
So I had no inkling I would ever be a judge, and that wasn't in my thoughts. What my thoughts were, quite frankly, was in Elgin, I knew people as a child who had tattoos of numbers on their arms.
Mhm.
My father was in the military, and a week after one of the concentration camps was liberated, he was there, and he could hardly ever talk about it. He couldn't explain. He lost most of his family in Europe. His father came to this country in order to escape the Tsar's conscription, which was 25 years for every Jewish boy. And I experienced anti-Semitism. I saw it. And it said to me that freedom is not free. Liberty is not free. There's costs. And when the lawyers are the conscience of our community, they have to be. I mean, when you think about changes in our society, we've had leaders, but law has been there because we had to break the law in order to make justice. And so I want to be part of it. And that's what I've done. I started out with the Attorney General's office in Illinois, and I've always been involved in various civic and other activities that have to do with our liberties and bringing justice to bear on what's going on in our world.
What I love about both of you is you both have talked about your backgrounds a little bit, like how you were the first Jewish person to run and be elected in Cook County.
Well, 18 years. I mean,
18 years.
Yeah.
And Chief Judge Blanco, I'm gonna turn it back to you because I remember in your intro you mentioned you're the first woman chief judge in your area. Was becoming a judge something that you intended to do, or was it something that you kind of found your way through your career?
Yeah, that's a great question. So I never thought I was going to go to law school. I was actually started as a biochemistry major and thought I was going to be a doctor. And
Wow.
by a turn of events, I was hit by a drunk driver. And I was told by the advisor at my school that the activities I was involved in, I couldn't do because I had some recovery time in there. And they said, you know, you should join the debate team because it would make you an interesting candidate for the medical schools. So I joined the debate team and turned out I was pretty good at that, and eventually was on full ride scholarships at school for it, and had scholarships to go to law school. I thought, well, maybe I'll just go to law school. And even during law school, I wasn't quite sure that I was cut out to be an attorney or that this was something that I would enjoy doing. But I did end up going into practice. I loved litigation, and I was, for the majority of my career, criminal defense attorney and a guardian ad litem for the best interest of children. And I found more and more I really enjoyed the opportunity to be neutral and to provide input to the court and say what I thought would be best in circumstances rather than being tied to a particular side of a case. And it was an evolution for me to come to the conclusion that really I wanted to serve on the bench here. And so mine was not, you know, something where from the beginning, I love when I hear stories like that. I knew from, you know, a young age, but mine was really not one of those stories.
I love that. And I can, you know, as you explain it, I can see the connection, while maybe not apparent on its face, how being neutral and taking the facts, it sounds very similar to science. So I have a master's in engineering as well. So I'm a pseudo scientist as well. And I know one of the things that I like to do, like you said, is like view things on its face. Like this is the facts, removing the politics. It sounds like you kind of come to that same conclusion. Is that a reason why you wound up? Is there a reason why you decided to become a defense attorney versus a prosecutor? Is it that kind of neutrality that you're looking for?
Well, truth be told, in the era of complete transparency, I started as a prosecutor. And then after I was married and found out I was going to be a mom, I just couldn't quite figure out, I didn't want to leave my children to drop them off at daycare and go to work at the office. I just couldn't quite figure out how to create that balance for me. And so I actually raised 2 children in a criminal defense practice and brought them to work with me until they were old enough to go to school. And so it was a juggle, but the shift for me actually came for what I felt would be best for my family. But I grew to love being a defense attorney so much because the human element of having people come in and talk with me about what they were going through in their lives and share with me during difficult times where they're facing serious consequences, their fears and you know what led them to where they are. I found that human connection was something that I quite frankly enjoyed. It's something that I from time to time miss. When I sit on the bench and I watch people with their clients, you can tell when an attorney has invested a lot of themselves in their clients and in their cases. And when I watch that, I miss that part of practice, but it's an honor that somebody picked me and would tell me these things and share and believed that I would be the one who could go to court and explain these things and fight for them. And so, you know, I kind of fell into the work because of my situation with my family, but I grew to love it so much that even when I was appointed to the bench, and that was at the time that I was appointed, it was my dream to do this, and I wanted it so badly. And I applied more than once to get the position. But it was bittersweet because closing my practice down, you know, was difficult. I had built all of that, and giving my clients to other attorneys was difficult because I cared about those people and their cases. And so, you know, it was bittersweet. And my experience, you know, was probably not unique for, I'm sure there are others have gone through something similar, but it was never like I wanted to leave something I didn't enjoy. And I always stepped into the next piece fearful that I wouldn't love this next journey as much as I loved the one I was leaving. Thankfully, I have thoroughly enjoyed my time on the bench, and I would do it all the same if I had to.
One thing-
There's a couple things that we can draw from what the Chief just said. I think one of it is, it doesn't matter what your background is, in that there is no path. Going back to your title, there is no path. It's a maze. And some of us will find the cheese in the middle and some won't. But how you get there, there's no straight line and you never know which way to go. But whatever way you go is fine. I mean, I think what I heard was passion. And I think that's really important. Judges that I have always admired and that I try to emulate are passionate about what they do. And that's what I heard. So, I know judges who went to school and did art or music, which has nothing to do with the law. It doesn't matter. And we get here, and then how you fall into things. I fell into work for the Attorney General with antitrust, and that turned into working for a law firm and doing antitrust. I didn't plan any of that, and nor did I plan to become president of the Chicago Bar. Although, of course, it came about for various reasons. But I think that what you have to do is follow your passions. What's important, and I tell people that are thinking about the law, and some people are unhappy. Don't be unhappy. The law, you can do anything you want. I mean, Aubrey, look at you. You're a lawyer and you're doing stuff that you're excited about. Because we talked before we started. And you got that passion. So maybe you'll be a judge. But that's what it takes. And another thing is, judges that are good care about people. You heard that. And I always think of being a judge as a helping profession. That's what we do. We help people. I don't have cases. I have relationships, broken down usually. State, individual, corporation, which the Supreme Court of the United States is an individual, but we'll leave that as it may. But that's what it's all about. And you're a psychologist, a psychiatrist, a matrimonial counselor, you name it. That's what we are as judges, right? And it's very rewarding, but the root is to do something you enjoy and do it well. And the other advice I would say is be a good person. I don't know, and Judge, you can tell us. I mean, usually judges are nice people. I mean, there's a few. I mean, I'm okay, but not too many not nice people make it to the bench. They may become not nice people after they're on the bench, but before, nobody wants to put on the bench somebody that doesn't get along with people, who's not one of the community. Usually, judges are involved in the community, and that's what I heard.
Judge Blanco, do you any thoughts about that? Any response?
Yeah, no, I completely agree. I do think it's important to do what you're passionate about. People will ask sometimes, what kind of area of law should I be doing if I want to become a judge? And I don't think that is as important. And even when the governor's office will call and ask me, what do you need when we pick a candidate, for your bench? What do you need? We need really good people, right? Because good people are going to be conscientious of the decisions that they're making. They're going to learn the law and they're going to put the time and effort in because they take pride in the work that they're doing. We need public servants that understand that we're not kings and queens in our justice center, but we are here to serve the community and figure out how the law is supposed to be nimble enough to meet the needs of each of the individual cases that are usually unique. And most things are not very black and white. Things are mostly gray and coming out with people who are creative, they're innovative, they know how to advance the law. And those are the things that we want. And passionate people and people who are good and take pride in their work, they do those things. And those are the most valuable members of the bench, not the one that came from a particular background, in law. But I think people who have diversity of perspective, that when we have a bench meeting and we have an en banc, those that are able to articulate those perspectives, challenge the way others are thinking, that's the kind of stuff that makes for a good judicial officer. And folks that bring those things to the table, like Justice was saying, generally are involved in the community. They understand and see the different sides of things. They may not agree with a particular perspective, but they're wise enough to listen to see what they can learn, and they're nimble enough to be able to shift when they need to. They check their own biases. They know they're not perfect. And so all of these things are important qualities, and they don't come from a particular area of law. They come from the type of person and fabric of who somebody is. So I think all of those things speak volumes. Sorry.
No, you're fine. You're fine. I actually want to talk about one other quality that you referenced earlier. Is you referenced your family, and you referenced moving to becoming a justice was a good move of many reasons for family balance. What many people may listen to this may have kids or may have other responsibilities at home that they have to balance, and they may be thinking, well, I can't become a justice. What would you say to them? And how do you balance your other responsibilities and being a justice?
Are you asking me first?
Yes. Sorry.
No, that's okay. Yes. So I have an 8-year-old and I have a 15-year-old right now. And something that I heard one of the federal magistrates say once in a CLE that I really took to heart was to explain to my kids. I mean, I'm not as at home as much as I sometimes wish I could be. The more involved you are in some of the roles that we have, take us away from our families, maybe more than we would like them to. But he had mentioned, I always tell my kids, where I'm going, what it is I'm doing, and why it's important that I'm there. And I think it serves as a role model for my children. And if I'm not at home, they understand where their mom is, what their mom is doing. And do I have guilt those times that I'm not at home? Absolutely, and I think for me, and I would not say that this is for everyone, balance is kind of where you create it. And it's always something that I'm working on. I'm a huge Disney person, so I go probably 3 times a year, and I like to take a break in the summertime with my kids. But I put those things on my calendar because those are quality time that I'm focused and able, and we get excited about it as a family, and it builds up, and all that euphoria that we're going on a trip is something that we enjoy. We are spiritual people, and so that's a huge part of our lives together. There are sometimes they're just set aside as family time, but it is really easy when you're passionate about things to become involved in so many good things. You have to kind of pick and choose, and carve out those times and keep it sacred for your family. And I'm not always the best at it, but I am a work in progress. And I think overall, I will say, I think the kids are very proud. And when we go places, they're proud of the work that I'm doing. And I think that that makes me feel better that I'm not home all the time the way that, of course, my heart would want to be.
Just Hyman, I'll turn it back over to you. It sounds like, would you like to, it sounds like you're very involved with a number of things, president of the local ABA, been justice, Lincoln extraordinaire. How do you balance all that from being a justice and your other legal activities with being a family man?
Yeah, I mean, it's hard. And I think you have to work with your spouse and your family. And I think the Chief Judge said it very well. That's the way to approach it. I think to be a judge, this is my personal opinion, in Illinois, it's recommended you have at least 10 years experience. That's not the law, but it's recommended. I think 15 should be required. And the reason is life experience. And being a judge, the greater your life experiences, the greater it's the diversity in the people you meet and what you've done and how you've done it. You need that. You need that because we change over time. All of us do. We're the same people maybe inside, but our experiences change us. And not having those experiences, I think it can affect the quality of the judge making the decision. And these are sometimes life and death decisions. They're family decisions. They're very important to somebody. And I realize that, and so does the Chief Judge. So I think that's something you should think about. And I would recommend I always had short-term goals and long-term goals. And I said, I never expected to be a judge. And when it came to me, I accepted immediately. And I've never, ever, the chief judge would tell you, it's the greatest job anyone can have, period. For a lawyer, it's the best. But the reason is because you're helping people. It's a people's job. Like people. If you like people, you want to help people, this is the job. But if that's your end goal, how am I going to get there? What do I need to do? It's a plan. And you can do that if that's what you want to do. And I think that's important. But it's how you conduct yourself and learn as much as you can. Do as many different things. If you're a civil lawyer, do criminal, pro bono, do something pro bono. If you're a criminal lawyer, do civil, do something. You got to know it because the chief judge, I mean, you handle different calls, different issues, and so do I. And you have to be able to juggle many balls.
Love it. Well, we're closing in on time a little bit. I want to give you both an opportunity for some final thoughts. Justice Hyman, I started with you, so I'm going to start this session with Chief Judge Blanco. Do you have any final thoughts that you would like to share to anybody aspiring to be a judge that you haven't shared thus far?
Yeah, I think the only other thing that I want to say, I think that it's easy for us to have a degree of an imposter syndrome where we feel like, well, why would they pick me? Or I don't think that I'm what they're looking for. Maybe I need more experience before I do this. And I think that we can sometimes get in our own way. I know even when I joined the bench, our bench now is pretty young here. But when I first joined the bench, all the people that I respected and I argued cases in front of, it was intimidating even as a judge to sit at that meeting and voice a different perspective. And I would say, be transparent, be authentic, be yourselves, and don't get in your own way where you worry and think that you're not what they may be looking for, because you probably are just what we need. And so that's the only thing I wanted to pass along that I know was something that I had to overcome in my journey to the bench.
Thank you for sharing that. Justice Hyman?
One of the things I do, and I've done it for many years, is to teach new judges judicial conduct. And I always start my class by asking everyone in the room to give one word that describes a judge. And so here are some of the words that from the last session: caring, courteous, diligent, empathetic, hardworking, humble, intuitive, patient, prepared, understanding. You get the idea. Make a list of what you think. And if you want to be a judge, make a list. I'm sure to include some of these. Put down those qualities. And then how do I become that if you're not? You need those qualities. And everyone said, and what I do is I make the list and I send it out to all the judges so they can put it on. I put it on your desk so you can look at it. And I'm going to tell you a secret. Since hopefully none of the judges no one listening now will be a judge that I teach. I'll tell you that I've done this class for 10 years at least, longer. And there's never the most important, in my opinion, the most important quality is never mentioned at all, every class. So I get to always mention the most important quality. And I think it's something you need to know as lawyers. And that word is courage. I don't want a judge who's not courageous. And being a judge means being courageous. And we know judges who aren't, and we know judges who are. And which one do you want to appear before? And, that has to do with, we need a bench as diverse as our communities, and even more so. It's got to represent the communities. It's got to have the more diversity, the more life experiences, the better the result. I can tell you that as an appellate court justice, if there are 3 white males on a panel, it's different if there's 2 women and an African-American justice. It's different. It's different every time we get together, depending on the combination, because of our life experience, which as a circuit court judge, you're on your own. But on the higher court, why do we have more justices on the higher court to make the decision? I think it's because the circuit court judges, the lower court judges is 1/3 as smart as an appellate court judge. We are each 1/3. So the smartest judge in the room is always the trial judge. They're always the smart, right? We always rely on that. It takes 3 of us to do their job, and then it takes even more than that to do the Supreme Court because they can't. It takes double or more. So the smartest judges, and in the circuit court or the trial court, they make judgments like this. Right? We take days, weeks, right?
The part trying to figure it together. What makes it? How's it work? I totally get it.
Right. But you go. It's a job. It should not be. In my opinion, happiness has nothing to do with money. We know this. What is happiness? What is going to bring you happiness? Think about that. Think about your life. What is it you want out of life? And if don't be a judge because you think it's going to make you happy. Be a judge because you want to help people.
I think I have nothing else left to say after that. That's a perfect ending to the session. Thank you both for both of you, Justice Hyman, Chief Judge Blanco, for joining. I definitely learned a lot from this session, and I hope that all the people live on here that will listen to this recording later will as well.
Thank you.